Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dusty, starlit world of ancient Sumer, where the night sky hums with secrets and the trickle of water measures the hours. Picture yourself sprawled on a reed mat, the air warm and thick, with the scent of baked clay and distant rivers. Above the stars glitter like a cosmic ledger, and somewhere nearby a soft drip drip echoes from a clay pot, counting moments in a way that feels both alien and oddly familiar. You're in a Sumerian city, maybe Uruk, where time isn't just a feeling, it's a tool carved from water and ingenuity. Fair warning, if you tried to keep up with their schedules without one of these water clocks, you'd probably be late for your own ziggurat dedication. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm curious where you're listening from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing at the heart of a Sumerian city, the year roughly 3000 BCE. Though nobody's shouting exact dates from the rooftops. The air's heavy with the smell of barley and mud brick, and the Tigris River gurgles in the distance, its waters feeding both crops and the strange device you're staring at, a water clock, or clepsydra as the Greeks would later call it. It's not much to look at a clay vessel, maybe the size of a large jug, with a tiny hole near the bottom. Water drips out, steady as a heartbeat, into another pot below. Each drop marks a sliver of time, and you can't help but feel a little awed. This is no sundial useless after dusk. This thing works all night under the stars, measuring moments with nothing but gravity and a potter's skill. You lean closer, hearing the faint plink of water, and wonder how something so simple could tame something as slippery as time. The Sumerians you see were obsessed with order. They built cities, canals, and laws when most folks were still chasing goats across hills. Historians point to their cuneiform tablets, those wedge-shaped scribbles on clay, as proof they were tracking time with precision by 3000 BCE. These tablets list festival dates, work schedules, even when to sacrifice a goat to appease an angry god. Time wasn't just a vibe, it was power. The water clock, or dib-dib, as some scholars guess they called it, was their secret weapon. You imagine a Sumerian scribe stylus in hand, glancing at the water level to decide when to call it a day. It's not exactly a smartwatch, but it's close enough to make you smirk. Now here's a quirky tidbit. Some tablets hint that Sumerians believed time had a divine pulse, like the gods themselves were dripping it out, drop by drop. They thought Enlil, the wind god, might have had a hand in how time flowed, which is why priests were so fussy about tracking it. You picture a priest muttering prayers over a leaking pot, half expecting Enlil to pop out and fix a clog. It's a bit absurd, but it makes you wonder, did they really think a god was in the plumbing, or was it just their way of making sense of the universe's rhythm? You're walking through the city now, past mud brick houses glowing faintly under torchlight. The water clock isn't just a priestly toy. It's everywhere. Temples, markets, even some rich guy's courtyard. You spot one in a corner, its water glinting under the moon. It's a simple setup, a tall, narrow pot filled to a marked line with a hole so tiny it takes hours to empty. Below it, another pot catches the runoff, sometimes marked with lines to show hours or smaller units. You try to picture how they figured this out. Trial and error, probably some poor apprentice dumping water and cursing when it leaked too fast. Historians still argue whether these clocks measured fixed hours or something more flexible like seasonal hours that stretched with the day's length. The debate's murky, mostly because the tablets don't spell it out, and you can't exactly ask a Sumerian for clarification. You crouch by the clock, watching the water drip. It's hypnotic, like a campfire for insomniacs. The Sumerians didn't have your modern obsession with seconds and minutes, but they needed to know when to plant prey or party. Their world ran on cycles, moon phases, floods, harvests, and the water clock was their bridge between the chaos of nature and the order of civilization. You imagine a farmer checking the clock to time his irrigation, or a merchant waiting for the last drip to close a deal. It's not perfect temperature changes could mess with the flow, and you're pretty sure nobody was cleaning these pots daily, but it worked well enough to keep a city humming. Let's talk about the stars for a second, since you were still sprawled under them. The Sumerians were stargazers mapping constellations like Enuma, Anu, and Lil, named after their sky gods. Their water clocks weren't just practical, they were cosmic. At night, when sundials were useless, the clocks kept time synced with star movements. You picture a scribe glancing from the dripping pot to the sky, checking if a star's position matched the water level. It's a bit like using a leaky bucket to double-check your horoscope, and you can't help but chuckle at the thought. Still, it's impressive those clay pots were their version of a planetarium tying earth to sky with every drip. You stand up brushing dust off your imaginary tunic. The city's alive around you, kids shouting, donkeys braying someone, baking flatbread that smells way better than your microwave pizza. The water clock keeps dripping indifferent to the chaos. It's not just a tool, it's a mindset. The Sumerians didn't just measure time, they owned it, carved it into their clay and their culture. You wonder if they felt the same rush you do when you hit a deadline just right, or if they ever forgot to refill the pot and missed a temple ceremony. Knowing human nature, probably both. As you wander deeper into the city, the clock's drip fades behind you, but its rhythm sticks in your head. It's a reminder. Time's always slipping, whether it's water through a hole or sand through your fingers. You're starting to get why the Sumerians were so obsessed with it. They weren't just counting hours. They were wrestling with eternity one drop at a time. You're still wandering the starlit streets of a Sumerian city. The faint drip of that water clock from earlier lingering in your ears like a song you can't shake. The night's warm, the air thick with the scent of river mud and roasted sesame. You're heading toward a potter's workshop now, where the real magic of these ancient timekeepers begins. Those clay pots you saw, unassuming a bit lumpy, aren't just random kitchenware. They're the heart of Sumer's obsession with taming time, crafted with a precision that makes you wonder if these folks were half artist, half engineer. You step into the workshop, the glow of a single oil lamp casting shadows on stacks of clay vessels, and you're about to see how a simple pot becomes a clock. The workshop's a mess, clay dust coats your sandals, and half-formed pots teeter on wooden racks. A potter hand slick with mud is shaping a vessel that looks like the water clocks you've seen. It's not fancy, a tall, narrow cylinder, maybe 2 feet high with a smooth rim, and a base just wide enough to keep it steady. The key you notice is a tiny hole near the bottom, no wider than a reed tip. You lean closer, squinting in the dim light, and see the potter testing it with a thin stick, making sure the hole's just right. Too big and the water gushes out like a bad joke. Too small, and it clogs faster than your sink after a spaghetti disaster. You smirk, imagining the trial and error that went into this pots cracking, water spilling apprentices probably getting yelled at in Sumerian. Here's the mainstream fact: these water clocks, or clepsydra, were standardized enough by 2500 BCE that archaeologists have found similar designs across Sumerian cities like Uruk and Nippur. Cuneiform tablets describe their use not just for temples, but for everyday stuff like timing labor shifts or market hours. The pots were filled to a marked line, and the time it took to empty through that tiny hole was a unit of measurement. Think of it as the Sumerian equivalent of an hourglass, but with more drip and less flip. You picture a foreman checking the water level to decide when workers could knock off for lunch. It's not Rolex level precision, but it kept a bustling civilization on track. Now, for the quirky bit, some tablets suggest the Sumerians decorated their water clocks with symbols of Nana, the moon god, as if the dripping water was a gift from the heavens. You imagine a potter etching crescent moons onto a clock, maybe muttering a prayer to keep the thing from leaking. It's a charming thought your modern clock doesn't come with divine vibes unless you count the battery's tendency to die at the worst moment. Did they really believe Nana was watching the water flow? Or was it just a way to make a boring pot look cool? Either way, it's a reminder that even their tech had a touch of poetry. You're kneeling by a finished clock now, watching the potter fill it with water from a nearby jug. The water's cloudy, probably straight from the Tigris, and you wince thinking about the sediment that's gonna clog that hole. The potter doesn't seem fazed, though. He sets the pot on a flat stone, checks the alignment, and lets it drip. You count the drops, each one a tiny plink, into the catch basin below. It's oddly soothing, like a white noise machine for the Bronze Age. The potter points to lines scratched inside the catch basin, marking intervals of time. You realize this isn't just a pot. It's a system, a way to carve the day into manageable chunks. You try to guess how long each mark represents, maybe an hour, maybe less. Historians still argue whether Sumerians used a fixed time unit or something more fluid like hours that shifted with the seasons. The tablets are vague, and you're stuck imagining a Sumerian shrugging close enough. The process of making these clocks fascinates you. The clay's local, pulled from riverbanks and kneaded until it's smooth as silk. The potter's hands move with a rhythm that feels timeless, shaping the vessel, with a wooden tool firing it in a kiln until it's hard as stone. You notice the care in the details, the rims reinforced to handle the weight of water, the base flattened to avoid tipping. It's not rocket science, but it's clever. You joke to yourself that if you tried this at home, you'd end up with a lopsided bowl and a flooded living room. The Sumerians, though, had it down to an art. They didn't just make pots, they made timekeepers that could outlast empires. You step outside the night air cooler now and spot a water clock in a nearby courtyard. Its drip barely audible over the hum of city life, merchants arguing, kids laughing, a stray dog sniffing for scraps. The clock's owner, maybe a wealthy trader, has it perched on a mud brick stand, a status symbol as much as a tool. You wonder how many pots they broke before getting the flow rate right. The water's movement feels like a pulse tying the city together. Farmers time their irrigation with it, priests schedule their rituals. Even lovers might sneak a glance to know when to meet under the date palms. You chuckle imagining a Sumerian rom-com where someone misses a date because the clock sprang a leak. The limitations of these clocks start to nag at you, though. Water evaporates in the heat, and Sumer's summers are brutal. Think 110 degree with no AC. A half-empty pot throws off the whole schedule, and you're pretty sure nobody's out here with a thermometer to adjust for viscosity changes. Still, the Sumerians made it work, probably with a mix of patience and swearing in cuneiform. You picture an apprentice tasked with refilling the clock at dawn, grumbling about it like you do when your alarm goes off. It's a reminder that even ancient tech had its quirks, not unlike your phone freezing during a crucial Zoom call. As you leave the workshop, the potter's still at it, shaping another clock under the flickering lamp. The city hums around you, and you realize these pots weren't just about measuring time, they were about controlling it, bending it to human will. You glance up at the stars, their slow arc a reminder of the bigger clock ticking over Sumer. The water clock's drip feels like a conversation between earth and sky, and you're starting to get why this simple invention mattered so much. You're back in the Sumerian city, the night air thick with the scent of damp clay and distant fires. The faint drip of a water clock pulling you deeper into this ancient world. You're standing by one now, close enough to hear the steady plink of water hitting the catch basin, each drop a tiny pulse of time. You're curious about how this thing actually works, not just the pot and the hole, but the mechanics behind it, the cleverness that turns a leaky jug into a timekeeping marvel. You crouch down, peering at the clay vessel, its surface etched with faint lines, and you can't help but feel a little nerdy excitement. This is no sundial, no star chart. It's a machine raw and simple, and you're about to figure out how the Sumerians made it tick. The water clock in front of you is a study in minimalism. It's just a clay cylinder, maybe 3 feet tall, with a narrowed neck and a flat base. Water trickles out of a small hole near the bottom landing in a wider, shallower basin below. You notice the basin has marks scratched inside lines that measure how much water's collected, each one a checkpoint in the day or night. The genius lies in the flow, steady, predictable, like a heartbeat you can count. You imagine a Sumerian craftsman squinting at the hole, tweaking its size with a reed or a bit of clay. Too wide and time races away. Too narrow and it crawls. You smirk thinking of your own struggles with a coffee maker that either gushes or dribbles, same vibe, different millennium. Here's the mainstream fact by around 2700 BCE. Sumerian water clocks were sophisticated enough to measure time in units that scholars think were roughly equivalent to 2 modern hours, called dana in their language. Cuneiform tablets from Uruk and Lagash describe these units used for everything from temple ceremonies to labor shifts. The clocks worked by filling the upper pot to a marked line, letting gravity do the rest. As water drained, the level in the catch basin rose, and those scratched lines told you how much time had passed. You picture a scribe checking the basin, nodding when it hits the right mark, maybe muttering time to wrap up this barley inventory. It's not atomic clock precise, but for a society without batteries or gears, it's pretty darn impressive. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets hint that Sumerians occasionally added herbs or oils to the water in their clocks, maybe to make them smell nice or to ward off bad spirits. You imagine a priest tossing in a sprig of something fragrant, claiming it keeps the clock pure for the gods. It's a bit like spritzing your Fitbit with lavender oil to make it more spiritual cute, but you're not sure it helped the accuracy. Did they really think a splash of myrrh made time flow better, or was it just a fancy touch for elite households? Either way, it's a glimpse into how they blended practicality with a touch of mysticism. You're still crouched by the clock, watching the water drip. The mechanics are deceptively simple, but you're starting to see the layers. The pot's shape matters, tall and narrow, to keep the pressure consistent as the water level drops. You try to wrap your head around the physics, which feels like a high school science class you barely passed. The flow rate depends on the hole size and the water's height, following rules the Sumerians probably learned through spilled water and broken pots rather than equations. You chuckle, imagining an apprentice panicking when the clock overflowed during a test run, soaking the workshop floor. It's not exactly a high-stakes tech startup, but you bet they felt the pressure. Historians still argue whether these clocks measured fixed time units or something more flexible like hours that stretched with the seasons. Some say the Sumerians tied their clocks to star movements, adjusting the water volume to match the night's length. Others think they used a standard measure like a set amount of water for a dana no matter the time of year. The debates stuck because the tablets don't give a clear blueprint, and you're left picturing a Sumerian shrugging. It works. Don't overthink it. You lean closer to the clock, noticing the clay's slight imperfections, tiny cracks a smudge from a potter's thumb. It's not perfect, but it's functional. A reminder that ancient tech was about getting the job done, not chasing perfection. You stand up, brushing dust off your knees, and take a step back to admire the setup. The catch basin's almost half full now, marking maybe an hour or two. You wonder how they calibrated these things. Did they time the drips against the stars, or just guess until it felt right? You imagine a Sumerian tinkerer, probably with a beard, and a bad attitude, filling and refilling the pot under the moonlight, cursing when it didn't match the temple's schedule. It's a slow process, but you're starting to respect the grind. These clocks weren't just tools, they were a way to wrestle order from a chaotic world, to pin down time like a merchant pinning down a deal. The city's buzzing around you now, the night alive with torchlight and chatter. You spot another water clock nearby, this one smaller maybe for a household. It's perched on a mud brick ledge, its drip barely audible over the sound of a street vendor hawking figs. You think about how universal this need for timekeeping is. Your phone pings with notifications, their pots dripped with purpose. You joke to yourself that if you brought a water clock to a modern office, your boss would probably call it a disruptive innovation. But there's something calming about its simplicity, the way it forces you to slow down and notice each drop. As you walk away, the clock keeps dripping, indifferent to your modern musings. You're starting to get how these devices shaped Sumerian life, not just by measuring time, but by giving it a rhythm, a pulse. The stars overhead seem to wink in agreement, and you wonder what else these clever pots can tell you about a world long gone. You're deep in the Sumerian night now, the city's hum softened by the cool breeze off the Tigris. The stars are bright, casting a faint glow on the ziggurat looming in the distance, its steps climbing toward the heavens like a giant's staircase. You're drawn to the temple precinct where the air smells of incense and anticipation. Here the water clocks you've been obsessing over aren't just tools, they're sacred, ticking away the moments when gods and mortals meet. You step into the temple's shadow, hearing the familiar drip of a clay pot, and you realize the priests are the ones keeping time's pulse for the whole city. It's a big responsibility, and you're about to see how they pull it off. The temple courtyard is alive with quiet purpose. Torches flicker, casting golden light on mud brick walls etched with symbols of gods, Inanna's star, Nana's crescent moon. At the center, a water clock stands on a raised platform bigger than the ones you saw in the market or potter's shop. It's almost regal, its clay polished to a soft sheen, water glinting inside like liquid starlight. You watch a priest robed in linen check the water level with a reed, his face serious but calm. The drip is steady, marking the time for prayers, offerings, or maybe a festival to appease Enlil, who's probably not thrilled about last week's drought. You smirk, imagining the priest muttering, "Better not mess this up, or we're all getting smited." Here's the mainstream fact. Sumerian priests used water clocks by 2800 BCE to time religious rituals, ensuring ceremonies align with cosmic events like lunar phases or equinoxes. Cuneiform tablets from Nippur describe schedules for offerings with priests, checking clocks to start chants or sacrifices at precise moments. Time was sacred, miss a ritual's start, and you might anger a god, which is a worse look than showing up late to a Zoom call. You picture the priest eyeing the clock, knowing the whole city's counting on him to keep the divine schedule on track. It's high stakes for a guy with just a pot and some water. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets suggest priests occasionally bless the water in the clocks, chanting over it to make the timekeeping pure. You imagine a priest waving a reed over the pot, maybe sprinkling in some sacred dust as if the gods cared about the water's spiritual vibes. It's like blessing your Wi-Fi router to get better signal charming, but you're not sure it changed the drip rate. Did they think divine approval made the clock more accurate? Or was it just a way to flex their authority? Either way, it adds a layer of mysticism to this muddy practical device. You're standing closer now, watching the priest adjust the clock. He pours water from a ceremonial jug, filling it to a scratched line inside the rim. You notice the catch basin below has marks for different rituals, maybe one for dawn prayers, another for midnight offerings. The system's elegant in its simplicity. As the water drains, the rising level in the basin tells the priest when to start chanting or burn incense. You try to calculate how long each mark represents, but it's tricky. Historians still argue whether these clocks measured fixed units or adjusted for seasonal changes like longer nights in winter. The tablets don't spill all the secrets, and you're left wondering if the priest just winged it, sometimes trusting the gods to cut them some slack. The temple's atmosphere is heavy, almost electric. You hear soft chants from deeper inside where other priests prepare offerings, barley dates, maybe a lamb if it's a big day. The water clock's drip feels like the heartbeat of this sacred space, tying human rituals to the cosmos. You imagine the pressure on these priests knowing a late offering could mean bad crops, or worse. It's not like they could blame a broken clock, though you bet some tried pointing at a clogged hole like, it's the god's fault. You chuckle, picturing a priestly argument over who forgot to clean the pot last week. The clock's design fascinates you. It's taller than the household ones with a wider base for stability, probably because it's used round the clock. You notice a faint glaze on the clay, maybe to slow evaporation in the heat. The Sumerians weren't messing around. They knew a dry clock was a dead clock. You think back to that potter's workshop, the care put into every vessel. Here that craft feels elevated, almost holy. The priest catches you staring and gives a slight nod like he knows you're in on the secret of time's power. You nod back, feeling oddly included, though you're pretty sure you'd spill the water if they handed you the jug. As you linger, the city beyond the temple feels distant, its noise muffled by the thick walls. The clock keeps dripping, indifferent to the weight of its job. You realize the priests aren't just timekeepers. They're gatekeepers holding the line between mortal chaos and divine order. The stars above seem to pulse in sync with the water, and you wonder if the Sumerians felt closer to their gods because of it. You're starting to see why these clocks mattered so much, not just for prayers, but for making sense of a universe that's always slipping away one drop at a time. You're weaving through the bustling streets of Uruk now, the Sumerian city alive with the clamor of daily life. Merchants shouting deals, kids darting between carts, the air thick with the scent of fresh-baked barley bread and river mud. The sun's climbing, baking the mud brick walls, but you're still tuned to the faint drip of a water clock somewhere nearby, its rhythm cutting through the chaos like a steady pulse. You're not in the temple anymore. You're in the thick of city life, where these clocks aren't just for priests, but for everyone, farmers, traders, even the guy selling questionable fish by the canal. You're about to see how water clocks keep this urban sprawl from falling apart. You pause at a busy intersection where a water clock sits on a low mud brick platform public as a park bench. It's simpler than the temple's rougher clay. No fancy moon god etchings, but it's doing its job. A small crowd glances at it now and then, a merchant checking when to open his stall, a laborer waiting for his shift to end. The water drips into a marked basin, each line a signal for some part of the city's rhythm: start work, break for lunch, haggle over goats. You smirk, thinking it's like a communal coffee break timer, except nobody's brewing espresso. If you forgot how this thing works, you'd be stuck guessing when to show up for dinner. Here's the mainstream fact: by 2600 BCE, water clocks were a staple in Sumerian cities like Uruk, used to coordinate everything from market hours to irrigation shifts. Cuneiform tablets from the period list schedules for public works like canal maintenance, timed by these dripping pots. The clocks brought order to a city of thousands where chaos was one late delivery away. You picture a foreman yelling at workers to hurry up, pointing at the clock like it's his boss. It's not just about time, it's about keeping a growing civilization from tripping over itself. Now, for the quirky tidbit, some tablets hint that water clocks were occasionally used in drinking games at Sumerian feasts. Picture a banquet with beer flowing and someone timing how long you can chug before the water hits a certain mark. It's like a Bronze Age version of Flip Cup, but with higher stakes and worse hangovers. You imagine a tipsy Sumerian noble slurring bets about who can outlast the clock, while a servant nervously refills the pot. Did they really turn sacred timekeeping into a party trick? Or was it just a way to flex their fancy clocks? Either way, it makes you like these folks a little more. You're standing by the clock now, watching the water level drop. It's hypnotic the way each drip carves out a moment. The basin's marks are worn smooth by years of use, and you wonder how many hands have checked this clock, how many lives it shaped. A woman nearby, balancing a basket of dates, glances at the basin and hurries off, probably late for a sale. You try to guess how the system works in practice. The clock's filled at dawn, maybe by a city official with a jug and a bad attitude. As the water drains, the rising level in the basin signals different tasks. You notice the marks aren't evenly spaced, which makes you wonder if they're measuring fixed hours or something trickier like time tied to the sun's arc. Historians still argue whether Sumerian cities used a universal time system across markets and temples, or if each district had its own clock slightly out of sync. Some tablets suggest a central authority like a priest or governor set the standard, but others imply local variations with each neighborhood tweaking its clocks. You picture the chaos of mismatched schedules, like trying to meet friends when everyone's watch is off by 10 minutes. The tablets don't settle the debate, and you're left imagining a Sumerian bureaucrat throwing up his hands saying, "Just refill the pot and call it good." You wander toward the market, the clock strip fading behind you. The city's rhythm feels alive, synchronized by these unassuming pots. A cart driver checks the clock before unloading grain. A scribe pauses to note the time on a clay tablet. You chuckle, thinking of your own life, rushing to beat deadlines, checking your phone like it's a lifeline. The Sumerians didn't have apps, but they had the same hustle, the same need to carve order from the day. You spot another clock near a canal, its water glinting in the sunlight. It's smaller, maybe for a work crew timing their shifts. You imagine the foreman cursing when the water runs low, like you curse when your laptop battery dies mid-meeting. The clock's limitations nag at you as you walk. Heat makes the water evaporate faster, and a clogged hole could throw off the whole day. You picture a worker blaming the clock for his late start, like you blame traffic for missing a call. But the Sumerians made it work with a mix of ingenuity and stubbornness. You're starting to see how these clocks wove the city together, turning a sprawl of mud brick and ambition into something that hums with purpose. The stars are fading as dawn creeps in, but the drip of the water clock keeps going, a reminder that time doesn't stop, not for you, not for Uruk. You're threading through the chaotic heart of Uruk's marketplace. Now the sun high and relentless, baking the mud brick stalls and filling the air with the scent of spices, sweat, and overripe fruit. The crowd's a tangle of voices, merchants haggling, donkeys braying, someone yelling about stolen figs. Amid the bustle, you spot a water clock perched on a wooden stand, its steady drip cutting through the noise like a metronome for this frenzied world. This isn't the temple's sacred timekeeping or the city's public schedule. This is the marketplace hustle, where every drop of water means a deal made or missed. You lean in curious to see how these ancient clocks keep the chaos of commerce in check. The clock's nothing fancy, just a clay pot scratched and sun-faded, with a small hole leaking water into a basin below. A merchant nearby, his tunic stained with olive oil, keeps glancing at it, timing his sales pitch to a customer, waving a handful of barley. The basin's marked with lines, each one a signal, maybe when to raise prices or close the stall. You smirk, imagining the merchant muttering, "Come on, buy the goat," before the water hits the next mark. It's not Wall Street, but the vibe's the same. Time is money, and you'd better not waste it. Here's the mainstream fact: by 2500 BCE, Sumerian markets relied on water clocks to regulate trading hours, ensuring fairness in a bustling economy. Cuneiform tablets from Ur describe how merchants used them to time auctions or settle deals before the day's trade ended. The clocks kept everyone honest. Nobody could claim they didn't have time to pay up when the water hit the final mark. You picture a trader checking the basin, nodding when it's time to wrap up, like you check your phone before a store closes. It's a small thing, but it kept the market from descending into a free-for-all. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets suggest merchants occasionally tampered with clocks, tweaking the hole to make time run slower during a big sale. You imagine a shady trader poking the hole with a reed to clog it, giving himself an extra few minutes to haggle. It's like rigging a parking meter, but with higher stakes and worse consequences if caught. Did they get away with it, or did an angry customer call out the trick? You picture a market brawl over a slowed clock, with clay shards and water everywhere. Sumerian drama at its finest. You're standing by the clock now, watching the water drip. The basin's almost half full, and a small crowd's gathered, eyeing it like it's the final countdown on a game show. A woman selling pottery checks the level, then shouts a last-minute deal to clear her stock. You notice the marks in the basin aren't uniform. Some are closer together, maybe for shorter intervals during peak trading hours. You try to figure out how they set this up. A market official probably fills the pot at dawn, maybe cursing the heat that's already evaporating the water. The system's simple but effective. As the water flows, the market moves, deals are struck, and the city's economy hums along. Historians still argue whether market clocks were synchronized with temple clocks or ran on their own schedule. Some tablets hint at a central authority setting the time, but others suggest each market had its own clock, leading to slight variations. You imagine the chaos of a merchant in one district closing early, while another still open, like stores with different hours in the same mall. The tablets don't clarify, and you're left picturing a Sumerian official shrugging, good luck sorting that out. It's a reminder that even ancient systems had their hiccups, not unlike your Wi-Fi dropping midstream. You wander deeper into the market, dodging a cart piled with reeds. The clock's drip feels like the market's heartbeat, setting the pace for every shout and deal. A scribe nearby scratches a sale onto a clay tablet, glancing at the clock to note the time. You chuckle, thinking of your own rushed grocery runs, checking the time to beat closing hours. The Sumerians didn't have digital receipts, but they had the same urgency, the same need to keep up with the day. You spot another clock at the market's edge, smaller maybe for a single stall. Its drip's a little off, probably a clogged hole. and you imagine the merchant cursing it like you curse a slow checkout line. The clock's flaws are obvious in this heat. The sun's brutal speeding up evaporation, and you bet dust and sediment clog the holes daily. You picture a merchant shaking the pot to clear it, water sloshing everywhere like you shaking a jammed printer. But the system works well enough to keep the market moving. You admire the hustle merchants, customers, even the kids stealing dates are all dancing to the rhythm of these dripping pots. It's not perfect, but it's alive, and you're starting to feel the pulse of Sumerian life in every drop. As you leave the market, the clock's sound fades, but its rhythm sticks with you. The city's a whirlwind of noise and motion, yet these simple clay pots hold it together, one drip at a time. You glance at the sky, the sun still blazing, and wonder how many deals were sealed today. Because of that unassuming clock. You're still in Uruk, the sun dipping low now, painting the mud brick walls with a golden glow as the city settles into the late afternoon. The market's buzz has softened, but the faint drip of a water clock still hums in the background, a reminder that time doesn't pause for anyone, not even for a quick nap under a date palm. You're moving away from the marketplace now, your sandals kicking up dust as you head toward the city's administrative heart, where scribes and officials wrestle with a bigger question, not just how to measure time, but how to organize it into days, months, and years. You're about to dive into the messy, fascinating world of the Sumerian calendar, where water clocks meet starry skies and spark debates that still puzzle scholars today. You pause near a scribe's quarters where a water clock sits by the entrance, its drip marking the hours as a young scribe scratches cuneiform onto a clay tablet. The air smells of dried reeds and ink, and you can't help but feel like you're peeking into a cosmic accounting office. The Sumerians didn't just track hours, they built entire calendars to wrangle time into predictable cycles, planting seasons, festivals, tax deadlines. But as you watch the scribe glance at the clock, you realize their calendar wasn't as tidy as your phone's app. It was a tangle of lunar months, solar years, and water clocks trying to keep it all straight. You smirk, thinking if you had to sync their calendar with your Google Calendar, you'd probably give up and move to a cave. Here's the mainstream fact by 2500 BCE. The Sumerians used a lunisolar calendar blending lunar months of about 29.5 days with a solar year of roughly 365 days, as evidenced by tablets from Nippur and Ur. Water clocks help track shorter intervals within this system, like the timing of festivals or administrative tasks. The calendar was critical for planning agriculture and religious events, but it wasn't perfect. Lunar months don't neatly fit into a solar year, so they had to add extra months now and then to keep things aligned. You picture a scribe checking the clock and the moon muttering about how the gods didn't make this easy. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets suggest Sumerians occasionally named their months after quirky local events like a big flood or a bumper barley harvest rather than sticking to a standard list. You imagine a month called "That Time the River Overflowed and Ruined My Sandals," which feels like something you'd name a bad week. Did they really personalize their calendars like this, or was it just a poetic flourish on a scribe's slow day? Either way, it's a reminder that their timekeeping had a human touch, not unlike your habit of labeling deadlines with frowny faces. You're standing by the clock now, watching the water drip into its basin, each mark a tiny step in the Sumerian day. The scribe nearby is tallying something, maybe tax records or festival dates, his stylus moving in rhythm with the clock's pulse. You try to wrap your head around their calendar. 12 lunar months make about 354 days, which falls short of the solar year. To fix this, priests would add an extra month every few years, a process called intercalation. You imagine them watching the stars in the clock, deciding when to slip in that bonus month, like you deciding when to finally tackle your overflowing inbox. It's a clunky system, but it kept their world spinning. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians had a standardized calendar across cities, or if each city, like Uruk or Lagash, tweaked its own. Some tablets suggest a shared system tied to the moon god Nana, but others show local variations with different month names or festival dates. You picture the chaos of a merchant traveling from Ur to Uruk, realizing their calendars don't match, like showing up to a meeting on the wrong day. The tablets don't settle the debate, and you're left imagining a Sumerian priest shrugging talk to the moon about it. You wander closer to the scribe, peering over his shoulder at the tablet. It's covered in wedges listing dates and times for a coming festival. The water clock's drip seems to anchor his work, tying his scribbles to the real world. You chuckle, thinking of your own calendar app with its endless notifications and color-coded chaos. The Sumerians didn't have push alerts, but they had the same struggle to make time make sense. You notice another clock nearby, smaller maybe for personal use. Its drips a bit uneven, probably a speck of dirt in the hole, and you imagine the scribe cursing it like you curse a glitchy app. The calendar's reliance on water clocks fascinates you. They weren't just for hours. They helped track the moon's phases, ensuring festivals hit the right night. You picture priests filling clocks at dusk, timing prayers to match the moon's rise, their eyes flicking between the basin and the sky. It's a dance of precision and guesswork, not unlike your attempt to time a perfect nap. The clock's flaws, evaporation clogs, must have driven them nuts, especially when a festival was at stake. You smirk, imagining a priest blaming a late moon on a leaky pot, like you, blaming your boss for a missed deadline. As you leave the scribe's quarters, the city's golden light fades into dusk. The water clock keeps dripping, a steady reminder that time's always moving, whether you're ready or not. You're starting to see how the Sumerians wrestled with time's big picture, using clay pots and lunar cycles to pin down a universe that refused to stay still. You're strolling through Uruk's dusty streets again, the evening air cooling as the sun sinks, leaving a pinkish haze over the mud brick skyline. The city's settling down, merchants packing up, kids scampering home, but the faint drip of a water clock keeps time's pulse alive. You're heading toward a scribe's workshop now, where clay tablets pile up like ancient spreadsheets, each one etched with the Sumerians' obsession, time-tracked with water and wedges. You're about to dive into how these tablets paired with water clocks turned fleeting moments into permanent records. The air smells of dried clay and sesame oil, and you can't help but feel like you're stepping into the world's first bureaucracy, where every drip was worth noting. You pause at the workshop's entrance, where a water clock sits on a low table. Its drip, steady as a scribe nearby, scratches cuneiform onto a damp tablet. The tablet's surface is smooth, the wedges precise, and you realize this guy's recording something tied to the clock. Maybe a work shift, a tax payment, or a temple offering. The clock's not just a tool here. It's a witness, it's watermarking moments that end up etched in clay forever. You smirk, thinking it's like a prehistoric time card system, except nobody's punching out for a coffee break. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2600 BCE, Sumerian scribes used water clocks to timestamp records on clay tablets, as seen in archives from cities like Ur and Girsu. These tablets tracked everything: grain deliveries, labor hours, even legal disputes, often noting the time of day via clock measurements. The precision helped settle arguments like who owed what barley when. You picture a scribe glancing at the clock, noting the water level to prove a merchant paid late, kind of like you screenshotting an email to cover your tracks in a work spat. Now, for the quirky tidbit, some tablets mention time disputes where people argued over whose clock was accurate, like a Sumerian version of my watch says you're late. You imagine two merchants pointing at their dripping pots, yelling about whose clock was truer, while a scribe sighs and writes it all down. Did they settle it with a new clock, or just flip a clay token? It's a funny glimpse into human nature. Arguing over time hasn't changed much, whether it's a leaky pot or a phone's battery dying mid-argument. You're inside the workshop now watching the scribe work. The water clock's basin is half full, its marks showing intervals, maybe hours, maybe smaller units for quick tasks. The scribe dips his stylus in water to smooth the clay, then etches a line about a grain shipment, noting the time by the clock's level. You try to read the wedges, but it's like deciphering emoji without a key. The system's clever, though the clock strip gives a measurable moment and the tablet makes it permanent. You imagine the scribe's pride in his work, knowing his tablet might outlast the city itself. Spoiler, it did. Archaeologists have dug up thousands of these, some still legible after 4,000 years. Historians still argue whether all scribes used a standard time unit across Sumer, or if each city had its own quirks. Tablets from Uruk suggest a shared system tied to the Dana, roughly 2 hours, but others from Lagash hint at local variations, maybe adjusted for different clocks or tasks. You picture the confusion of a scribe moving cities, his tablet's timestamps not matching the local clock, like you struggling with time zones on a work trip. The tablets don't give a clear answer, and you're left imagining a Sumerian bureaucrat muttering, "Just write it down and move on." You lean closer, watching the scribe finish his tablet. He sets it to dry, the clock still dripping beside him. You notice the basin's marks are worn smoothed by years of use, and you wonder how many moments this clock has recorded: births, deaths, deals, disputes. It's a time capsule in clay, and you chuckle, thinking of your own overflowing note app full of half-baked ideas and grocery lists. The Sumerians didn't have cloud storage, but they had the same urge to pin down time to make it last. You step outside, the night air crisp now, the stars peeking through the haze. Another clock drips nearby, its sound blending with the city's hum. Crickets' distant laughter, a donkey's stubborn bray. You think about the tablets buried in the earth for millennia, waiting to tell their stories. The water clock's flaws come to mind. Evaporation in the heat clogs from river silt, but the scribes worked around them just like you work around a glitchy laptop. You imagine a scribe cursing a stuck clock, shaking it, like you shake a jammed printer, water sloshing everywhere. As you wander on, the workshop's glow fades behind you. The water clock keeps dripping its rhythm, tying the city's fleeting moments to the tablet's lasting words. You're starting to see how these simple pots and clay scraps held Sumer together, making time not just measurable, but memorable. You're back under the Sumerian sky, the stars now sharp and bright as the city of Uruk quiets into night. The air carries a faint chill, laced with the scent of river reeds and smoldering hearths. You're drawn to the edge of the city, where the ziggurat's silhouette looms like a silent giant, its priests no doubt watching the heavens. The familiar drip of a water clock hums nearby, but tonight it's not just about marking hours, it's about tying those drips to the cosmic dance of stars and planets. You're about to see how the Sumerians wove their water clocks into their stargazing, making time a bridge between earth and sky. You pause, feeling the weight of the universe above, and wonder how a leaky pot could keep up with the stars. You're standing by a water clock now set on a mud brick platform near an open courtyard. It's a sturdy one, its clay glazed to a faint sheen, the drip steady as ever. Nearby, a priest astronomer robe slightly askew, eyes fixed on the sky, checks the clock while tracking a star's path. You follow his gaze to a constellation, maybe one they called the Bull of Heaven, twinkling over the horizon. The clock's role here is subtle, but crucial. It measures the time between a star's rise and its peak, helping the Sumerians map the heavens with a precision that makes you raise an eyebrow. You smirk, thinking it's like using a dripping bucket to schedule a SpaceX launch. Wildly ambitious, yet somehow it worked. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2700 BCE, Sumerian astronomers used water clocks to time celestial events as recorded on tablets like the Enuma, Anu, and Lil, a series of star charts and omens. These clocks help track the movement of stars and planets, ensuring rituals and predictions aligned with cosmic cycles. You picture the priest noting the water level. When a star hits a certain point, his tablet ready to record the moment for posterity. It's not just about time, it's about syncing human life with the god's celestial clock, a task as high stakes as your Wi-Fi holding up during a Netflix marathon. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets suggest Sumerians believed certain stars influenced the water clock's flow, as if a planet's alignment could make the drips luckier. You imagine a priest squinting at the sky, muttering that Jupiter's position means the clock's running blessed tonight. It's like checking your horoscope to see if your alarm clock will behave charming, but you're skeptical. It changed the physics. Did they really think the stars tweaked the drip rate? Or was it just a way to make their astronomy feel more divine? Either way, it's a glimpse into a world where science and superstition shared a reed mat. You're closer to the clock now, watching the water glint under torchlight. The basin's marks are precise, each one tied to a specific star's movement. You try to picture how it works. The priest fills the pot at dusk, noting when a key star rises. As the water drips, he tracks its level against the star's arc, maybe marking when it hits the zenith. It's a slow, patient process, and you imagine the priest stifling a yawn, wishing for a stronger cup of barley beer. You chuckle, thinking of your own late-night scrolling, checking the time when you should be sleeping. The Sumerians didn't have screens, but they had the same urge to watch the clock and the sky. Historians still argue whether water clocks were the primary tool for astronomical timing or just a backup for star observations. Some tablets suggest clocks were cross-checked with sundials during the day and star positions at night, while others imply they were the main event, especially on cloudy nights when stars played hide and seek. You picture a priest cursing a foggy sky, relying on the clock to guess when a star should appear, like you guessing when a delayed flight will land. The tablets don't settle the debate, leaving you with a mental image of a Sumerian astronomer shrugging stars or water, pick one. You step back, letting the priest do his work. He's scribbling on a tablet, now the clock's drip guiding his stylus. You notice the pot's design taller than the market ones, with a narrower hole for slower, more precise drips. It's built for patience for nights spent watching the heavens. You think back to that potter's workshop, the care put into every vessel. Here, that craft feels cosmic, tying earthly time to the stars' eternal march. You joke to yourself that if you tried this, you'd probably spill the water and misread the sky, claiming Venus was a UFO. The clock's flaws creep into your thoughts. Clouds could ruin a night's observations, and a clogged hole might throw off the timing. You imagine the priest shaking the pot, muttering about river silt, not unlike you restarting a router when the internet lags. But the Sumerians made it work, blending clocks and stars into a system that predicted eclipses and guided harvests. You glance up, the constellation still gleaming, and feel a quiet awe. The water clock's drip, so small and earthy, somehow holds its own against the vastness of the sky. As you wander away, the city's night wraps around you, the drip fading, but its rhythm lingering. You're starting to see how the Sumerians made time a cosmic story, one drop and one star at a time. You're still in Uruk, the night air crisp now, carrying the faint scent of river mud and cooling clay. The city's quieter, its streets lit by flickering torches, but the steady drip of a water clock keeps you grounded, pulling you toward a potter's yard where the glow of a kiln pulses like a heartbeat. You're about to get your hands dirty, metaphorically at least, and step into the world of crafting a water clock or clepsydra from scratch. It's not just about slapping clay together. It's about precision, patience, and a touch of Sumerian ingenuity. You can almost feel the clay under your fingers as you imagine building one of these timekeepers, each drip a small victory over the chaos of time. You step into the yard where a potter is kneading a lump of river clay, his hands moving with a rhythm that feels older than the city itself. The water clock you're picturing starts here with this muddy lump, and you're curious about every step. The potter's tools are simple wooden paddles, a reed for carving a stone to smooth the surface, but the process is anything but. You watch him shape the clay into a tall cylinder, narrow at the top, wide at the base. The trick, you realize, is the hole at the bottom, tiny and precise, where time will literally drip out. You smirk, thinking if you tried this, you'd end up with a wonky vase and a flooded floor like a DIY disaster on YouTube. Here's the mainstream fact: Sumerian water clocks, as described in tablets from around 2600 BCE, were crafted with specific designs to ensure consistent water flow, often using river clay fired in kilns to withstand constant moisture. Archaeologists have found fragments of these vessels in sites like Ur and Nippur, showing standardized shapes, tall, narrow, with a small, carefully drilled hole. The craftsmanship was key. A poorly made pot could crack under the water's weight, and a bad hole could ruin the timing. You picture the potter testing his work, filling the pot, and cursing when it leaks too fast, not unlike you tweaking a finicky gadget. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets hint that potters occasionally mark their clocks with personal signatures like a tiny cuneiform tag saying, "Made by Enki's favorite." You imagine a potter sneaking his name onto a clock, hoping it ends up in a temple like an ancient artisan flexing on Instagram. Was it pride or just a way to track their work in case it broke? Either way, it's a human touch that makes you grin, knowing even Sumerians wanted credit for their craft. You're kneeling by the potter now, watching him shape the clay. He starts with a flat base, slapping the clay onto a stone to keep it stable. The walls rise slowly, his hands smoothing the surface to avoid cracks. You notice he's obsessive about the thickness, too thin, and it breaks. Too thick, and it's too heavy to move. The hole comes last, drilled with a reed or a bone tool, and you can see the concentration in his eyes as he tests the size. You try to imagine doing it yourself, poking a hole and praying it doesn't turn your clock into a sprinkler. You chuckle thinking of that time you tried to fix a leaky faucet and ended up calling a plumber. The firing process is next, and you follow the potter to the kiln, a dome of mud brick glowing red inside. The clock-to-be sits among other pots, baking in the heat to harden its clay. You realize the glaze, sometimes a mix of ash and sand, helps seal the surface, slowing evaporation. It's a small detail, but it shows how much thought went into these things. You picture the potter waiting by the kiln, hoping the clock doesn't crack, like you waiting for a cake to rise without collapsing. Historians still argue whether potters used templates for consistency or relied on experience, with some tablets suggesting guilds of craftsmen shared techniques, while others imply it was more freestyle. You imagine a potter shrugging, "I've made 100 of these, trust me," and you're not sure if that's confidence or chaos. You step back as the potter pulls the finished clock from the kiln, now a reddish-brown vessel, sturdy and smooth. He fills it with water to test it, watching the drip with a critical eye. The flow's steady landing in a basin with scratched marks for timing. You're impressed it's not just a pot. It's a machine built to measure time with nothing but clay and gravity. You think back to the market clocks, the temple ones all born in places like this. The effort feels monumental, yet so ordinary, like your daily grind of emails and errands. The clock's flaws linger in your mind. A slight crack could ruin it, and sediment might clog the hole. You imagine the potter shaking his head when a client complains, like you sighing when your phone freezes mid-update. But the Sumerians made it work, their clocks ticking away in temples and markets. You glance at the stars, their slow arc, a reminder of why this craft mattered. The potter's work tied human hands to cosmic rhythms, one carefully shaped pot at a time. As you leave the yard, the kiln's glow fades, but the drip of a nearby clock follows you. You're starting to feel the weight of Sumerian time, crafted from mud and fire, ready to measure the moments that built a civilization. You're back in the shadow of Uruk's ziggurat, the night air heavy with the scent of burning incense and the distant murmur of the Tigris. The stars are out, sharp against the sky, but it's the soft drip of a water clock that pulls you toward the temple's heart. You're stepping into sacred ground again, where the priests don't just track time, they wield it using those clay pots to orchestrate prayers, offerings, and rituals that keep the gods happy. The temple's walls loom around you, etched with symbols of Inanna and Enlil, and you can feel the weight of divine expectations. You're about to see how water clocks turn spiritual devotion into a precisely timed dance, each drip a step closer to the divine. You approach a water clock in the temple courtyard, larger than the market ones, its clay polished to a soft glow under torchlight. A priest, his linen robe swaying, checks the basin's water level with a reed, his face calm but focused. The clock's drip marks the moments for tonight's ritual. Maybe a prayer to Nana the moon god, or an offering to ensure the harvest doesn't flop. You watch the water glint each drop, a reminder that the gods don't like tardiness. You smirk, imagining a priest muttering, "If we're late, Enlil's sending a sandstorm, and I'm not cleaning that up." Time here isn't just practical. It's wholly a contract between humans and the heavens. Here's the mainstream fact: by 2800 BCE, Sumerian temples used water clocks to schedule rituals with precision, as noted in cuneiform tablets from Nippur and Ur. These clocks ensured ceremonies like offerings at dawn or lunar eclipse prayers happened at the exact moment the gods expected. The tablets describe priests filling clocks to specific marks, timing chants or sacrifices to align with cosmic events. You picture a priest eyeing the clock, starting a hymn, right as the water hits a line, like you timing a presentation to the second. It's high-stakes stuff, miss the mark, and the gods might skip your next blessing. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets suggest priests occasionally reset clocks mid-ritual, topping up the water to extend a ceremony if the omens weren't right. You imagine a priest sneaking a jug to the clock, adding water, while whispering, "Let's try that prayer again." Nana's not listening. It's like restarting a Zoom call when the vibe's off, but with more divine consequences. Did they really think they could trick the gods with a quick refill, or was it just a desperate move to save face? Either way, it's a peek into the human side of divine timekeeping. You're standing closer now. The clocks drip loud in the quiet courtyard. The basin's marks are detailed, each one tied to a specific ritual moment. Maybe the start of a chant, the lighting of incense, or the slaughter of a sacrificial goat. You try to guess how they calibrated it. The priest probably filled the pot at dusk, timing the drips against the moon's rise, or a star's position. It's a delicate balance, and you imagine the stress of getting it right, like you stressing over a deadline with your boss breathing down your neck. Historians still argue whether temple clocks were standardized across Sumer or varied by city, with some tablets hinting at local tweaks for different gods or festivals. You picture a priest from Ur visiting Uruk, confused by their clock's marks, like you fumbling with the new app's settings. The tablets don't clarify, leaving you with a mental image of a priest shrugging gods know best. The temple's atmosphere is thick, the air buzzing with chants from deeper inside. You notice another clock nearby, smaller, maybe for minor rituals. It drips a bit off, probably some silt clogging the hole, and you imagine a junior priest panicking, shaking the pot like you shake a jammed vending machine. The flaws are real: heat speeds up evaporation, and a single speck of dirt can throw off the schedule. But the priests make it work, their faith and stubbornness keeping the rituals on track. You chuckle, thinking of that time you blamed a late project on a glitch, when really you just overslept. The clock's design catches your eye: taller, with a reinforced rim to handle hours of water weight. You think back to that potter's yard, the care put into every curve. Here that craft feels sacred, each drip a prayer in itself. The priest catches you watching and nods as if you're in on the secret of time's power. You nod back, feeling a strange connection, though you're pretty sure you'd spill the water if they handed you the jug. The stars overhead seem to pulse with the clock, tying the temple's rituals to the cosmos. You're starting to see why these pots were so vital, not just for scheduling, but for making the gods feel close, one drip at a time. As you step away, the temple's glow lingers, the clock's rhythm fading into the night. You're left with a sense of awe, knowing these simple devices carried the weight of divine order in a world that felt as chaotic as yours. You're wandering through Uruk's quiet streets now, the night deepening, the air thick with the scent of cooling mud brick and distant date palms. The city's pulse has slowed, but the faint drip of a water clock still echoes, pulling you toward the royal quarter, where the king's palace looms, its walls adorned with carved lions and stars. Here time isn't just for priests or merchants, it's for power, for decrees that shape lives, and for justice that hinges on the precise moment a water clock's basin fills. You're about to see how Sumerian kings used these dripping pots to govern, turning time into a tool of authority. You step closer to the palace gates, torchlight flickering, and feel the weight of royal responsibility, each drip a reminder that even kings bow to time. You spot a water clock just inside the courtyard, larger than the market ones, its clay etched with symbols of Gilgamesh. The legendary king, some say, ruled Uruk. A scribe stands by it, stylus poised over a tablet, while a royal official, tunic, crisp beard, immaculate, checks the water level. The clock's drip marks the moment for a decree to be read, or a dispute to be settled. You imagine the king himself, maybe lounging on a reed mat, waiting for the clock to signal when to address the city. You smirk, picturing him tapping his foot, impatiently muttering, "Hurry up, water, I've got a kingdom to run." It's not exactly a throne room with a digital timer, but it's close enough to make you grin. Here's the mainstream fact: by 2500 BCE, Sumerian kings used water clocks to time official acts like issuing decrees or holding court, as recorded in tablets from Urin-Lagash. These clocks ensured fairness in legal proceedings, say, giving each side equal time to argue or set deadlines for royal orders like tax collections. You picture the scribe noting the exact moment a decree is announced, the clock's water level proving it was done on time. It's like a judge banging a gavel, but with a clay pot and a lot more dripping. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets hint that kings occasionally used royal clocks with fancier designs like inlaid shells or gold flecks to show off their power. You imagine a king pointing at his blinged out clock, bragging, "My time's worth more than yours." It's like a modern CEO flashing a Rolex, but with a clay pot and divine swagger. Did these fancy clocks actually work better, or were they just status symbols? Either way, it's a reminder that even ancient rulers loved a bit of flex. You're standing by the clock now, watching the water drip into its basin, each mark a signal for some royal act, maybe a law being read or a prisoner's fate decided. The scribe's tablet is half covered in wedges, detailing a dispute over land or grain. The clock's level noted to prove when it was settled. You try to imagine the scene: a crowd gathered, the king's voice booming, the clock dripping as all eyes wait for the final mark. It's high stakes, like a courtroom drama, but with dustier sandals and no commercial breaks. You chuckle thinking of your own deadlines, how you'd kill for a clock that makes you look as authoritative as a Sumerian king. Historians still argue whether royal clocks were synchronized with temple clocks or ran on their own schedule to assert the king's power. Some tablets suggest a unified system with priests and kings sharing time standards, while others imply the palace had its own clocks, slightly off to flex royal independence. You picture a king insisting his clock's better, like you arguing your phone's time is more accurate than a friend's. The tablets don't settle it, leaving you with a mental image of a royal scribe rolling his eyes, muttering, "Just pick a drip and go." The clock's design catches your eye, taller with a wider base for stability, maybe to handle long court sessions. You think back to that potter's yard, the care put into every vessel. Here that craft feels regal, each drip carrying the weight of a king's word. You notice a faint crack in the clay, a reminder of the clock's flaws: evaporation in the heat clogs from river silt. You imagine the scribe shaking the pot to clear it, like you restarting a frozen laptop, water sloshing as the official glares. But they made it work, keeping the palace's rhythm steady from decrees to judgments. You step back, the palace courtyard quiet now, save for the clock's relentless drip. You spot another clock nearby, smaller, maybe for timing messengers' departures. Its drips uneven, probably a speck of dirt, and you picture a servant cursing it like you cursing a slow elevator. The royal quarter feels alive with time's power, each drip a reminder that even kings answer to it. You glance at the stars, their slow arc echoing the clock's rhythm, and you're starting to see how these pots turn time into a crown, one drop at a time. As you leave the palace, the drip fades, but its echo lingers. You're left with a sense of time's weight, not just for priests or merchants, but for those who ruled a civilization with clay and water. You're trudging along the edges of Uruk now, where the city gives way to fields stretching toward the Tigris, the air rich with the scent of wet earth and budding barley. The sun's just rising, casting a golden haze over the canals that crisscross the land like veins. The familiar drip of a water clock hums nearby, not from a temple or palace, but from a farmer's plot, where time means the difference between a bountiful harvest and a dusty failure. You're about to see how these dripping pots tied Sumer's lifeblood, its agriculture, to the rhythm of water both in the fields and in the clocks that timed them. You pause by an irrigation ditch, the sound of flowing water blending with the clock's drip, and feel the pulse of a civilization rooted in the land. You spot the water clock near a canal perched on a mud brick ledge, its clay weathered but sturdy. A farmer tunic stained with dirt checks the basin's water level, then adjusts a wooden gate to let water flood his field. The clock's drip tells him when to open or close the gate, ensuring each patch of barley gets just enough water. You watch the steady trickle, each drop a signal for the farmer's next move, and you can't help but admire the simplicity. You smirk, thinking if you tried timing your garden's watering with a leaky pot, you'd probably drown your tomatoes or let them shrivel. This guy, though, has it down to an art. Here's the mainstream fact. By 2600 BCE, Sumerian farmers used water clocks to manage irrigation schedules, as noted in cuneiform tablets from Girsu and Lagash. These clocks helped allocate water fairly across fields, especially in complex canal systems that fed entire cities. The tablets describe how farmers timed water flow to avoid waste or drought, with clocks ensuring each plot got its share. You picture the farmer nodding at the clock opening a gate, right as the water hits a mark, like you timing a sprinkler with an app, except his app is a clay pot and a lot of patience. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets suggest farmers occasionally named their clocks after local deities, like Nisaba's drip for the grain goddess, hoping it brought better crops. You imagine a farmer patting his clock, whispering, "Come on, Nisaba, don't let me down this season." It's like naming your lawnmower Thor for extra cutting power. Cute, but you're not sure it helped the barley grow. Did they really think a divine name made the clock more reliable? Or was it just a way to feel closer to the gods? Either way, it's a glimpse into a world where even muddy fields had a touch of the sacred. You're standing by the clock now, watching the water drip into its basin. Each mark a cue for the farmer's work flood this field, rest move to the next. The basin's lines are uneven, maybe adjusted for different crops or seasons. You try to figure out the system. The farmer fills the pot at dawn, letting it drip as he opens and closes canal gates. It's a delicate balance, and you imagine him cursing when the water runs low, too soon, like you cursing a low battery during a power outage. Historians still argue whether irrigation clocks were standardized or varied by region, with some tablets suggesting shared designs across Sumer, while others hint at local tweaks for different soils or canals. You picture a farmer from Ur visiting Uruk, confused by their clock's marks, like you struggling with a new thermostat. The tablets don't settle it, leaving you with a mental image of a farmer shrugging water's water. Just make it flow. The field around you is alive, the canals trickle mixing with the clock's drip. You notice another clock nearby, smaller maybe for a single plot. Its drips a bit off, probably silt clogging the hole, and you imagine the farmer shaking it, water sloshing like you shaking a jammed coffee maker. The clock's flaws are obvious. Heat speeds up evaporation, and river sediment loves to gum things up. But the farmers make it work, their fields green and thriving, despite the quirks. You chuckle, thinking of your own attempts at gardening, how you forgot to water your herbs for a week. These Sumerians, though, built an empire on barley and water, with a clay pot as their metronome. You think back to that potter's yard, the care put into every clock. Here that craft feels vital, each drip feeding the land that feeds the city. The farmer catches you watching and nods as if you get the stakes of his work. You nod back, feeling a strange kinship, though you're pretty sure you'd flood the field if he handed you the gate. The stars are fading as dawn breaks, but the clock keeps dripping, tying the farmer's labor to the rhythm of Sumer's seasons. You're starting to see how these pots weren't just tools. They were the heartbeat of a civilization that turned dust into abundance. As you leave the fields, the clock's sound lingers, blending with the canal's flow. You're left with a quiet respect for these farmers who used water and time to carve life from the earth, one careful drip at a time. You're back in the heart of Uruk, the midday sun blazing down, turning the mud brick streets into a dusty oven. The air smells of baked clay and faint traces of market spices, but you're drawn to a quieter corner where a water clock drips steadily outside a wealthy merchant's home. Its clay is polished, etched with faint patterns, and you realize this isn't just a tool, it's a status symbol, a sign of who controls time in this bustling city. You're about to dive into the social pecking order of Sumerian timekeeping, where water clocks weren't just for priests or farmers, but markers of power and prestige. You pause hearing the drip and wonder who got to own time in a world where every drop counted. You're standing by the clock now, its basin catching water under the watchful eye of a servant who glances nervously at the house's entrance. The merchant inside, probably counting his barley profits, uses this clock to schedule meetings or deliveries, showing off his wealth with every drip. It's not just about telling time, it's about showing you can afford to measure it. You smirk, thinking it's like flashing a smartwatch at a coffee shop, except this guy's flex is a clay pot and a whole lot of water. If you tried to keep up with his schedule without a clock, you'd probably be late to your own grain deal. Here's the mainstream fact: by 2500 BCE, water clocks were status symbols in Sumerian society, with wealthier households and officials owning finely crafted versions, as noted in tablets from Uruk and Sippar. These clocks, often larger or decorated, signaled control over time, a resource as valuable as gold in a city driven by trade and rituals. You picture a merchant proudly showing off his clock, its steady drip proving he's not just rich, but organized like you, boasting about a perfectly synced calendar app. Now for the quirky tidbit: some tablets hint that elite Sumerians sometimes gifted water clocks to temples, a humble brag disguised as piety. You imagine a merchant hauling his fancy clock to the ziggurat saying, "For the gods, of course," while winking at the crowd. It's like donating a stained glass window to a church, but with more dripping and less glass. Did they really care about the gods, or was it a way to flex their influence? Either way, it's a peek into a world where time was as much a currency as barley or silver. You're closer to the clock now, noticing its details. Smooth glaze, a crescent moon etched near the rim, maybe a nod to Nana the moon god. The servant refills it with a jug, careful not to spill, and you imagine the merchant's wrath if a single drop throws off his schedule. The basin's marks are precise, tailored for his day meetings, shipments, maybe a banquet with other bigwigs. You try to picture running a household like this, timing everything with a dripping pot. It's intense, and you chuckle thinking of your own chaotic mornings, fumbling with coffee while your phone pings reminders. Historians still argue whether water clocks were widely accessible or mostly elite tools. Some tablets suggest even modest households had simple versions, while others imply only the wealthy or officials could afford well-made ones. You picture a small-time trader with a leaky second-hand clock, jealous of the merchant's shiny model, like you eyeing a coworker's new laptop. The tablets don't settle the debate, leaving you with an image of a Sumerian shrugging, "Get a better clock if you want to keep up." You step back, watching the servant guard the clock like it's a treasure. You think back to the potter's yard where these vessels were born, and the temple where they carried divine weight. Here, they're about power, social, economic, personal. The merchant's clock isn't just practical. It's a statement saying he's got the resources to control time, while others scramble. You notice another clock nearby, plainer, probably for a less wealthy neighbor. Its drips a bit uneven, maybe a clogged hole, and you imagine the owner grumbling like you grumbling over a slow Wi-Fi signal. The clock's flaws are stark in this heat. Evaporation eats away at the water, and a speck of dust can mess up the flow. You picture the servant shaking the pot to clear it, water sloshing like you restarting a glitchy app. But the elite don't care. They've got servants to fix it, unlike the farmers or scribes making do with less. You chuckle, thinking of that time you splurged on a fancy gadget, only to realize it broke just as easily as the cheap one. The merchant's clock keeps dripping its rhythm, a quiet flex of privilege in a city where time is power. As you leave the merchant street, the drip fades but its meaning lingers. You're starting to see how water clocks shaped Sumer's social ladder, marking not just hours, but who stood where in a world ticking away one drop at a time. You're weaving through Uruk's sun-baked streets again, the heat pressing down like a heavy blanket, the air thick with dust and the faint tang of river water. The city hums around you, merchants haggling, kids chasing a stray dog, but the steady drip of a water clock pulls you toward a quiet courtyard where a weathered clay pot sits leaking time drop by drop. You're about to dive into the flaws of these ancient devices, the quirks and hiccups that made Sumerian timekeeping as frustrating as it was brilliant. You pause, watching the water glint in the sunlight, and wonder how they dealt with a system that was equal parts genius and headache. Spoiler, it wasn't always smooth sailing, and you're pretty sure someone cursed these pots more than once. You're standing by the clock now, its drip slower than you'd expect, maybe clogged by a speck of river silt. The basin below is only half full, and a nearby scribe looks annoyed, scribbling on a tablet as if the clock's betraying him. You can relate. Nothing's worse than tech failing when you're on a deadline, like your laptop freezing mid-email. The Sumerians built a civilization on these clocks, but they weren't perfect. Heat, dirt, and human error could turn a precise timekeeper into a soggy mess, and you're about to see how they wrestled with those limits while keeping their world on track. Here's the mainstream fact: Sumerian water clocks used widely by 2600 BCE were prone to inaccuracies due to environmental factors as noted in tablets from Uruk and Nippur. Heat caused water to evaporate faster, and sediment from river water often clogged the tiny holes, disrupting the flow. Scribes and priests had to constantly monitor and adjust them, sometimes recalibrating with star observations to stay accurate. You picture a priest squinting at the basin, muttering about the sun stealing his water, like you grumbling when your phone's battery drains in the heat. It's a reminder that even ancient tech came with a user manual nobody wrote down. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets suggest Sumerians tried to fix clogged clocks by adding oils or herbs to the water, hoping to slick up the flow or appease the gods. You imagine a farmer shaking his clock, tossing in a pinch of myrrh, like it's tech support for the divine. It's like pouring essential oils into a jammed printer, optimistic but you're skeptical. It worked. Did they really think a splash of lavender vibes could unclog a hole, or was it just desperation? Either way, it's a funny glimpse into their problem-solving, equal parts practical and superstitious. You're closer to the clock now, noticing its imperfections, a faint crack in the clay, a slightly uneven rim. The hole at the bottom is tiny, barely wider than a reed, and you can see why it's a magnet for trouble. A single grain of sand could stop the drip, throwing off a temple ritual or a market deal. You try to picture the maintenance, a scribe or a servant shaking the pot, poking the hole with a stick, maybe swearing in cuneiform when it doesn't work. You chuckle, thinking of your own battles with a finicky coffee maker, water everywhere, but where it's supposed to be. The Sumerians didn't have online forums to troubleshoot, but they figured it out, keeping their clocks running through sheer stubbornness. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians had standardized fixes for these flaws or relied on ad hoc solutions. Some tablets describe specific roles like clock keepers who cleaned and recalibrated the pots, while others suggest it was a free-for-all, with anyone nearby grabbing a jug to refill or unclog. You imagine a temple apprentice stuck with clock duty, muttering about how he didn't sign up for this, like you stuck fixing a shared office printer. The tablets don't give a clear answer, leaving you picturing a Sumerian shrugging, just keep the water moving. You step back, watching the scribe fiddle with the clock, pouring in fresh water to reset it. The basin's marks are worn smoothed by years of use, and you wonder how many times this pot's been cleaned, refilled, or cursed. The flaws are real. Evaporation in the brutal Sumerian heat could shrink a full pot by midday, and a clog could delay a ritual, leaving priests scrambling. You think back to the temple where a late prayer could mean divine wrath, or the market where a slow clock might cost a merchant his profit. It's a high-stakes game, and you smirk imagining a Sumerian-ite guy, if they had one, saying, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" The clock's design is clever but fragile, and you think of that potter's yard where every vessel was a gamble against cracks and leaks. Here, those risks feel tangible, each drip a small miracle. You notice another clock nearby, smaller, its drip completely stopped, probably a full-on clog. A kid nearby pokes at it with a stick, and you laugh, remembering your own attempts to fix a gadget with a good whack. The Sumerians made it work, though, their clocks ticking through dust and heat, keeping temples, markets, and fields in sync. As you leave the courtyard, the drip picks up again, faint but steady. You're left with a quiet respect for the Sumerians' grit, building a civilization on a system that leaked as much as it worked, one stubborn drop at a time. You're standing at the edge of Uruk now, the city's mud brick walls glowing faintly under a moonlit sky, the air cool and tinged with the scent of river reeds and distant smoke. The familiar drip of a water clock hums nearby, its rhythm, a quiet anchor in the night. You're not just thinking about Sumer anymore. You're looking beyond its borders to neighboring civilizations like Egypt and Babylon, where timekeeping was also a craft, but with their own twists. You're about to compare Sumer's dripping pots to the timekeeping tricks of their rivals, seeing how water clocks stacked up in a world where everyone was racing to tame time. You pause, the stars above whispering of other lands, and wonder how Uruk's leaky pots held their own against the competition. You're by a water clock now, its clay worn but sturdy, dripping steadily into a basin marked with time's increments. It's a Sumerian classic, simple, functional, a bit finicky in the heat. You think about Egypt, where the Nile's rhythms shaped their own clocks, and Babylon, where Sumer's ideas took root and evolved. The Sumerian clock feels like the scrappy underdog built from river clay and grit, yet it's the one that set the stage for others. You smirk, imagining a Sumerian trader boasting, "Our pots drip better than your fancy obelisks," like you hyping your old phone against a friend's shiny new model. Here's the mainstream fact by 2500 BCE. Sumerian water clocks influenced neighboring cultures, with evidence of similar devices in Babylon and early forms in Egypt, as seen in archaeological finds and texts from Mesopotamia and the Nile Valley. Sumer's outflow clocks, water draining from a pot, were simpler than Egypt's later inflow designs, where water filled a marked vessel. Babylon adopted Sumer's style, but refined it, adding more precise markings. You picture a Babylonian scribe tweaking a Sumerian clock, like you upgrading an app to make it run smoother. Sumer's clocks were the blueprint spreading through trade and conquest, shaping how others measured time. Now for the quirky tidbit, some Egyptian records suggest they thought Sumerian clocks were too leaky for their liking, preferring stone basins for durability. You imagine an Egyptian priest sniffing at a Sumerian pot, saying, "Clay really like you," side-eyeing a cheap knockoff gadget. Did they actually shade Sumer's tech, or was it just cultural pride? Either way, it's a funny glimpse into ancient tech rivalries where even a dripping pot could spark a debate. You're closer to the clock now, watching its water glint under the moonlight. You think of Egypt's clock, stone-heavy, with water flowing in to mark time, not out like Sumer's. They were fancier, less prone to cracking, but harder to move. You picture an Egyptian hauling a stone basin, while a Sumerian carries his clay pot, both eyeing each other like, my clock's better. Babylon's clocks, meanwhile, were like Sumer's, but with upgrades, tighter holes, better glazes, maybe even a few extra marks for precision. You chuckle thinking of your own tech upgrades, how your new phone's just the old one with a shinier screen. Historians still argue whether Sumer's clocks directly inspired Egypt's or if the idea of water-based timekeeping evolved independently. Some tablets and Egyptian inscriptions suggest trade routes carried the concept, while others point to parallel inventions driven by similar needs. Irrigation rituals trade. You imagine a Sumerian trader showing off his clock in Memphis only for an Egyptian to scoff, "We've got our own." The evidence is murky, leaving you picturing a shrug across civilizations like time's time figure it out. You step back, comparing the Sumerian clock's simplicity to its neighbor's flair. Egypt's stone basins were durable but clunky. Babylon's refined designs were precise, but owed everything to Sumer's groundwork. You think back to that potter's yard where these humble pots were born. Their flaws, evaporation clogs, were universal, and you imagine an Egyptian priest cursing a slow drip just like a Sumerian, not unlike you swearing at a lagging app. Yet Sumer's clocks were portable, cheap, and versatile, perfect for a scrappy city like Uruk. You notice another clock nearby, smaller, its drip faltering, probably silt again. You laugh, picturing a Babylonian tweaking it with a smug, "We do this better now." The Sumerian clock keeps dripping its rhythm, a quiet defiance against its fancier rivals. You admire its grit, how it held its own despite its quirks. The stars overhead feel like a shared clock for all these cultures, each one chasing time in their own way. You're starting to see Sumer's water clocks not just as pots, but as the spark that lit a regional race to measure the unmeasurable. As you leave the courtyard, the drip fades, but its echo lingers, connecting Uruk to distant lands. You're left with a sense of Sumer's quiet influence, its leaky pots rippling through time, one drop at a time. You're standing in Uruk's fading light, the city's mud brick walls glowing softly as the sun dips below the horizon, leaving a sky streaked with orange and purple. The air's cooling, carrying the scent of river mud and distant fires, and the familiar drip of a water clock hums nearby, a steady pulse, tying this ancient world to the future. You're not just in Sumer anymore. You're looking forward, tracing how these simple clay pots left a mark on civilizations long after Uruk's streets fell silent. You're about to explore the legacy of Sumerian water clocks, how their dripping ingenuity rippled through time to shape the way later cultures measured their days. You pause, the stars emerging above, and feel the weight of an idea that outlasted empires. You're by a water clock now, its clay worn but proud, dripping into a basin scratched with marks of time. It's a humble thing, yet its descendants would tick in the courts of Babylon, the temples of Greece, even the forums of Rome. You think back to the potter's yard, the temple, the marketplace, all those places where these clocks shaped Sumerian life. Now you're seeing their echo in history, how a leaky pot became a cornerstone of human progress. You smirk, imagining a Sumerian craftsman time traveling to a Roman bathhouse, spotting a fancier clock and muttering, "Nice try, but we did it first." Here's the mainstream fact. Sumerian water clocks, developed by 2600 BCE, are considered one of the earliest forms of mechanical timekeeping, influencing later civilizations like Babylon, Greece, and Rome, as evidenced by archaeological finds and texts like Babylonian astronomical records. Babylon refined the design, Greece added gears, and Rome scaled them up for public use. But the core idea, measuring time with water's flow, traces back to Sumer's clay pots. You picture a Greek philosopher tweaking a clock, unknowingly nodding to Uruk's potters, like you using an app built on code from decades ago. Now for the quirky tidbit, some Greek texts suggest they called their water clocks thieves of time, a playful jab at how the dripping water seemed to steal hours away. You imagine a Sumerian scribe hearing that and scoffing, "Steal, we invented that drip." It's like your friend complaining about a slow app, while you know it's based on tech you grew up with. Did the Greeks really see clocks as sneaky, or was it just poetic flair? Either way, it's a reminder that Sumer's invention carried a human touch that echoed across centuries. You're closer to the clock now, watching its water glint under torchlight. Its simplicity, clay, a hole. Gravity feels like the seed of something huge. Babylon took Sumer's outflow clocks and made them more precise with tighter holes and better glazes. Greece went wild, adding weights and gears to create the clepsydra's fancier cousin used in courts to time speeches. Rome blew it up, building massive public clocks for bathhouses and forums. You chuckle, thinking of your own tech evolution, your clunky first phone, versus today's sleek models. Sumer's clocks were the flip phone of timekeeping, basic but groundbreaking. Historians still argue whether Sumer's influence was direct, or if water clocks emerged independently elsewhere. Some point to trade routes, with Sumerian ideas spreading to Babylon and beyond, while others suggest Egypt and China developed similar devices on their own. You picture a trader carrying a clay clock to Babylon, only for a local to claim, "We could have thought of that," like you claiming you invented a viral TikTok trend. The evidence is fuzzy, tablets and artifacts don't tell the whole story, leaving you with the mental image of a Sumerian shrugging. "Ours worked fine." You step back, thinking of the clock's flaws, evaporation, clogs, cracks, and how later cultures tried to fix them. Babylon used better seals. Greece added mechanical tricks, Rome went for scale. You imagine a Roman engineer shaking a Sumerian-style pot, cursing its leaks like you cursing a laggy app. Yet Sumer's design endured its simplicity, a strength. You notice another clock nearby, smaller, its drip faltering, probably silt again. You laugh, picturing a Greek tinkerer trying to upgrade it with gears only to break the pot. The Sumerians made do with what they had, and their idea outlived them, dripping through history. The legacy feels alive as you stand here, the clock's rhythm tying Uruk to distant times and places. You think of the temple priests, the market hustlers, the farmers, all relying on these pots to carve order from chaos. That order spread, shaping how humans planned, prayed, and governed. You glance at the stars, their slow arc, a universal clock, and feel a quiet awe. Sumer's water clocks weren't just tools. They were a spark lighting the way for every ticking device that followed. As you walk away, the drip fades, but its echo carries on, a reminder that even a simple pot can change the world, one drop at a time. You're back in Uruk one last time, the night settling over the city like a soft blanket, the air cool and fragrant with the scent of river reeds and fading fires. The stars are bright, a glittering map above the mud brick rooftops, and the faint drip of a water clock hums nearby, its rhythm a quiet heartbeat in the stillness. You're standing in an open courtyard, the ziggurat silhouette looming in the distance, and you're ready to reflect on time itself, how the Sumerians wrestled it into clay pots, and how those drips shaped their world and yours. You're about to drift into a dreamy close, letting the clock's pulse guide you through the night, one final drop at a time. You're by the water clock now, its clay worn smooth by years of use, the water glinting under moonlight as it drips into a basin scratched with marks. Each drop feels like a whisper from the past, tying you to the priests, farmers, and merchants who lived by this rhythm. You think back to that first night in Uruk, sprawled on a reed mat staring at the stars, while the clock counted moments. Now you're seeing the bigger picture, how these simple pots weren't just tools, but a way to make sense of a universe that never stops moving. You smirk, imagining a Sumerian scribe time traveling to your world, baffled by your digital clock, but nodding at its relentless tick like, same vibe, different tech. Here's the mainstream fact: Sumerian water clocks, used widely by 2600 BCE, were a foundational step in human timekeeping as seen in tablets from Uruk and Nippur, setting the stage for calendars, schedules, and cosmic understanding across civilizations. They gave Sumer a way to order their days, prayers, harvests, laws, all synced to the steady drip of water. You picture a priest checking the clock under starlight, ensuring a ritual hit the right moment, like you setting an alarm for a morning meeting. It's a small act, but it held a civilization together, one drop, carving order from chaos. Now for the quirky tidbit, some tablets hint that Sumerians believed the sound of a water clock's drip could ward off bad dreams, like a protective charm for sleepers. You imagine a family setting a clock by their mat, hoping its plink plink kept nightmares at bay, like you playing white noise to drift off. Did they really think the drip had magic, or was it just a soothing bedtime ritual? Either way, it's a sweet thought, making you feel closer to these ancient folks, chasing sleep just like you. You're closer to the clock now. Its drip, slow and steady, each plink a soft echo in the quiet night. You think of the potter's yard where these pots were born, and the temple where they carried divine weight. You remember the market's hustle, the farmer's fields, the king's decrees, all timed by this unassuming device. The flaws come to mind: clogs, evaporation, cracks, but so does the Sumerians' stubbornness, making it work through heat and dust. You chuckle, thinking of your own battles with tech, how you curse a slow app but keep going. The Sumerians didn't give up either, their clocks dripping through centuries, shaping how we measure time today. Historians still argue whether the Sumerians saw time as linear or cyclical, a line of drips or a wheel of seasons and stars. Some tablets suggest they viewed it as a cycle tied to lunar months and harvests, while others hint at a more linear tally for records and laws. You picture a scribe debating it over a clay pot, like you arguing with friends about whether time feels fast or slow. The tablets don't settle it, leaving you with an image of a Sumerian shrugging times whatever the gods say it is. You step back, the courtyard silent save for the clock's gentle drip. You think of its legacy: Babylon's refinements, Greece's gears, Rome's grand clocks, all tracing back to this humble pot. You imagine the stars above, watching Uruk's rise and fall, while the idea of measuring time spread far beyond. You notice another clock nearby, its drip faint, maybe slowing as the water runs low. You laugh, picturing a Sumerian kid poking it with a stick, like you fiddling with a gadget past its prime. The clock keeps going, though its rhythm a quiet gift from a world long gone. As you linger, the night feels softer, the stars closer. The water clock's drip slows your thoughts, each plink a gentle nudge toward rest. You're not in Uruk anymore. Not really, you're floating in a timeless space where the Sumerians' ingenuity meets your own quiet moment. The city fades its walls, dissolving into shadow, but the drip lingers, a soothing hum that carries you toward sleep. Let the stars keep their watch. Let the water flow on. You're safe here, wrapped in the rhythm of ancient time, drifting into dreams where past and present blur. The clock's blink softens, the night deepens, and you're ready to let go one final drop, guiding you to rest. Sweet dreams.